You're about to watch the greatest resource for figuring out the annual revenue of a potential Airbnb. This free course is a section that you're about to go through that is hyper focused on predicting the annual revenue. However, it is only one section of a lot of sections of my entire free course. If you are trying to learn the skill of being able to predict the annual revenue, please watch this all the way through before buying an Airbnb property. If you can just harness and learn this one skill, you can avoid buying an unprofitable Airbnb. If you want to learn the entire process, click down below and you will be able to go to my website. In the top right corner, you can sign up for my free course. All right. Now, I'm not going to talk too much here. I'm just going to let you get started. So go enjoy that video. And if you want to hire me to find you a property, click down below, sign up for a call, and we can show you what it's like to have me find you an Airbnb. How's it going, everybody? You are now entering the section of property valuation, which is, to me, the most important section out of probably all of them. And the reason being is because what we're doing here is we are analyzing in depth an individual property that you are considering to purchase. And so everything that I've been teaching you now has been, trying to find the market, and then what's the best thing within that market, and building a buy box for that. And it's helped to narrow down what would be a really good property to purchase. However, every single property is different. The size of them, the shape of them, the backyards, the front yards, how old it is, how new it is. Oh, there's so many different little factors, right? And you need to be able to feel 100% confident that that property is going to make you X. And whatever that X is it needs to make that amount. And you need the confidence to know for a fact that that specific property is going to make it, going to be able to hit that number. And I do that, the way I get to that answer and that confidence is by going through the property valuation process. And so during this entire module, I'm going to be explaining all this to you. Now, I just want to stress that this is probably the hardest thing that you're going to be doing out of everything that I've been teaching you. This is the most complicated. There's so many different scenarios and there's so many different little factors that can make a difference or make or break a property. But this is the skill that you need to learn to ensure that you are actually finding and buying the right best possible property. Okay. Again, when we get all the way down to the buy box, it kind of gives us a good understanding of what properties might be able to work out. But what if one of the properties that meets it could, one property could meet 90% of your buy box, but the second living room is just too small, or the backyard is just too small, or something along those lines, and then therefore it wouldn't work out. And if you didn't go into all the little tiny details I'm going to explain to you right now, and you would not know that, and you would have ended up buying a property that would have missed one main revenue driver, and that main revenue driver would have been the amount that puts you up high enough to make all of your profit. And that's the reality of what happens, right? So this is what I refer to as like the double check or the triple check before you officially confirm that you're going to buy this property. You're taking the property and you're analyzing it as much as you possibly can to get to that answer. Okay. And so I can't stress it enough. This is super, super important to learn, study, and get really good at. And I am teaching you a skill here that you can use for literally the rest of your real estate career, your Airbnb career, whatever it is. Okay. Now, I'm going to give you the overview because we're going to go into all the details. But the overview is this is generally what a completed property evaluation ends up looking like, with the main objective is to figure out what you believe the property is going to make, what you are 100% confident the property is going to make. And in this scenario, I was 100% confident that the property was going to make $75,000 a year. And the way that I did that was I first analyzed the entire property and memorized everything about it. Every single last little detail within this property, I analyzed it. Then I went out and I found which properties and comps I thought were going to be the most relatable to this property, okay? And then with these properties, I made notes on each one of these homes, but not the notes that we have been making. The notes that I made here were directly related to if I thought this property was better than our property, right? So I was going one for one. I'm like, can our property compete with this property? And essentially what I'm doing here is I'm trying to find what I refer to as top comps, comparable comps, and bottom comps. Okay. And so a top comp is a property that we cannot beat. They're better than us. They have some features that we can't compete with, whether it be waterfront or it's bigger or it's more luxurious or whatever it is. It's like we can't make that amount of money. So I'm finding and this puts us into reality, right? Where we're not high in the air saying like we can make $100,000 off this property. It's like, no, you can't, right? That's what a top comp does for you. It's like, it proves to you that you're not going to be able to make that amount of money. And then what you have are these comparable properties that tend to be right in the middle of all of your data, where they're like, hey, this property is very similar to your property. You might even be able to do a little bit better than that property. But for the most part, your property and their property and the way they designed yours and the way you're going to design yours and all the amenities that they added and all the amenities that you're going to add, they're all very, very similar. And this is how much they're roughly making, right? And so that's what's going to happen in the mid comps, right? The comparable comps. And then the base comps are the ones that you know for a fact you're going to be able to beat. When you're reviewing it, you're like, there's so many things wrong with this listing. We're so much bigger and better. We can do so much better than this, blah, 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 whatever it is. And you believe that for a fact that you're going to be able to beat that comp. These ones, the bottom comps, honestly, are my favorite because they give me so much confidence that I will be able to outperform the amount that they're currently making. And then the mid comps, I'm like right there in the middle. And I get into all this. There's like a lot of training around this. Okay. And so this is what we're doing. This is the process that we're going through here is we're analyzing every single one of these properties up against directly with the property that we're considering, knowing what all the main features are of this property that make it a good and a bad property. And then we reason with ourselves. Why we believe we're going to fall with whatever range we fall within based off of each one of these different properties, right? And then by doing all of that, we have logically explained to ourselves. And when you logically explain to yourself and you use a lot of reasoning, there's no lying. You can't lie to yourself. You can't make it up, right? You have to be like, you have to say the truth. Otherwise, it just doesn't add up and doesn't make sense. And that's why following the data and following this process doesn't allow you to lie to yourself and just make up a number. And so what ends up happening is you end up getting to this point where you feel 100% confident that your property is going to make X if you do Y, right? And that's kind of like what this part is down here. So it's like, okay, what do I have to do to get my property to actually be able to hit this number? And then on top of that, you also know what your worst case scenario is, which is very helpful. You're like, if everything goes wrong, this is where we're going to end up. And that's going to be really helpful for the underwriting stage. And then the last part is like, you have your best case where it's like, well, what if everything works out? Where am I going to end up there, right? What if I do things better than I thought I could do them? Or something goes great with the market? What does that look like, right? And you have a little bit of a reality of what that could end up looking like as well. And so by following this process, you eventually get to the point of knowing for a fact how much a property is going to be making for you. And again, this is a skill that you're learning. It's not easy. You're going to get frustrated with it. There's a lot of little details. And I tried to break it down as much as I possibly could through all of this. And one thing that I haven't explained yet that I want to explain is that I've done this hundreds and hundreds of times. For TechVestor, for other people, I've done this over and over and over again. And the reason I feel so confident to be able to teach you my process is because with TechVestor, they have, I can't remember exactly running as of today, but we've bought in over 100 properties and there's about 70 to 80 properties that are up and live, and a good 50 plus of those homes, we have enough data to be able to know exactly how much they're going to make at the end of the year, right? So in other words, I had to determine how much the property was going to make before we actually bought it. So I had to do this entire property valuation process to say, I believe this property is going to make $100,000, right? And then what ended up happening was we bought the property, we put it together, we listed it, and we managed it. And guess what? We figured out how much that property is going to make over that time period. And what that gives me is proof of how accurate my prediction was in comparison to how well it actually performed during that time period. And I am accurate within 14% conservatively, meaning that if I said it was going to make $100,000, it actually made $114,000. Therefore, and that's over like 50 plus properties with a few more that are, the other 20 or so that are still ramping up. I'm showing that I'm getting closer to that. Okay. And so what I'm trying to say, I'm not trying to show that as a brag. What I'm trying to say is like the process works. What I'm teaching you works. If you follow the process and analyze it in the way that I'm explaining to you and put in the work to build this skill, you will be able to do what I'm showing to you today. Okay. And you're not going to be good at it tomorrow. Okay. It's going to take some time and some practice to actually get to that point. And again, you're going to be frustrated, but I promise you it's going to be worth it. And it does work. So without, further ado, let's get into it. And if you guys have any other questions, let me know, but this is going to be quite the section. How's it going, everybody? For this video, what I'm going to be walking you through is the property valuation template. And it's what I've been using with TechVestor for over a year now. And I've done this hundreds and hundreds of times, but I'm just going to walk you through the template so you understand all the different little things you can see here and what everything means. And so I'll also show you an example of one that I've already filled out so you can have an understanding as to why you need to fill all these things out. What are you filling them out with? And why do they matter? Okay. Naturally, I'm going to be getting into way more detail with all of this as we get into the other videos. This is just going to be an overview, okay? So starting right from the beginning, I like to add in the address right there and also down here. It's a good way to just keep track of each property that you're doing. And then if you are going to start to do an evaluation, don't use this template here. Come here and press duplicate, and then that's going to give you a whole other one that you can obviously use and fill out completely, okay? So I'm just going to delete that for now. So instead of showing you the blank one, I'm going to show you one that's filled out just so you can see everything that I added into this. So you can get a better feel for it. Typically, the first thing that I do is actually fill out this section right here. So I'm filling out the date that I'm doing it, the link to the actual property, the number of bedrooms and bathrooms that I'm reviewing. So this and this. I also add in the square footage and the home value. Now, these three right here are really good to reference as you're evaluating the property. Just like either when as you're going through the analysis to remind you how big is this home or how many bathrooms does it have, something along those lines. That's why I like to add those in, because I found myself constantly trying to refer back to those things. And then also the home value. As you're doing this, you may realize that as you're going through the information that the where your house is actually going to end up falling, like how much you think it's actually going to end up making, is not going to be meeting the 20% rule. And so you can actually just stop quicker than completing the entire analysis. And again, I'll get into explaining all that, but that's why I put the home value into there. Okay. The note section is typically something that I fill out at the very, very end, or if I come across something that I find to be really important and I want to remind myself of that, that's where I'm going to be adding in the notes. It's whatever you want to put in there, just general things. And I'll explain how I use it as I go further into this. This section right here, the revenue confidence, is obviously the main objective of the property valuation. You're trying to figure out what you believe the 100% confidence is, or to be 100% confident about how much you think this property is going to make. And this is obviously the most important number. However, it's one of the last things that you fill out. So you have to fill out everything else beforehand to be able to get to these numbers. Now, if we keep going, there's the key features and the main concerns. This is sort of as you're reviewing the property, you've realized like what are the great things about this property that you want to remember as you're going through this. So like it has a really large deck, or it's a log cabin, it's secluded, it has a pool table room, like whatever those things may be. And then everything that you're worried about with this property, which would be location for this scenario, right? Now, the reasoning for the revenue here that you can see, this here to me is the most important piece of the entire process. And what you're doing is you're filling out what you believe the revenue to be, and you're reasoning with yourself as to why it would be that amount. And I'm going to teach you this process as thoroughly as I possibly can, but this is just the section. This is typically how big it is, how much I type up every single time when I do this. There's probably a ton of spelling errors in there, but that does not matter. All it matters is that you get to this 75%. Now, over here, you can see we have something called design and amenities. When you're going through the analysis, you're going to be immersed in this data and this information specifically for this one property. And that's where you're going to be able to see all of your biggest insights as to what kind of design the property needs to have, if it needs an extra bedroom, if it needs to have a pool table. All of the little details that the property would need is fresh in your mind. And that's why I like to add this here as a reminder to fill these things out. Like I need to do all of these things. And then this will become handy when we do the underwriting as well. Okay. Now on to the next section, and these two are combined with each other, okay? And these two are the properties that you found to be comparable for the home that you're looking at. So these are all of your comps is what I refer to them as. And they are all the other listings that you thought related most closely with the property that you were analyzing. And you bring them in here, you bring in the titles along with it. I'll show you how to do all of this. And they're obviously going to be in order as to who's making the most and who's making the least. And then once they're in here, what we're going to be doing is making notes on each one of those properties and trying to determine how it matches up with the property that we are actually analyzing. Okay. And so I know I make notes like crazy, and I keep telling you, make notes, and go, make sure you're not missing anything. These notes here are different than most of the other notes that you've been making. These notes are saying, do I think this Airbnb that I'm looking at right here, this first one here, this Airbnb listing, is better or worse or the same as the listing that I'm currently evaluating. And I'm writing in the notes as to why I think it is that, why I think it's better, or why I think it's very comparable, why I think it's a worse property and we can definitely beat it, right? And that's what I'm trying to do when I'm filling out all these notes. So each one of these, comp one matches up with comp one up here, okay? Fairly straightforward. I'm not going to explain the logic of everything here. Just wanted to break down how I fill everything out so you can get a general feel and understanding for this. You will see me do this multiple times, filling this out and how I go about doing it. But this is the general overview of it. You will need to make your own copy of this. So all the instructions are right here. Go to File, make a copy, and you're going to get your own editable version. And then again, always duplicate this when you are about to use it so that you are not messing with the original template. It's yours. You can do whatever you want with it, but it's just a good practice to always make sure to duplicate it. Okay. So that's everything for this video. I hope it was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one. How's it going, everybody? So before we get to filling out this template and adding in all this information and finding comparable properties, there's one step that we need to do prior to that, and that is memorizing every single last detail about the property that you are going to be analyzing. And so this step, and you can see I have the property loaded and ready to go here. This step is so important to ensure that you're not missing anything. And as you can tell, I'm very, very anal about ensuring that you do not miss anything when you're reviewing your property. The whole reason we're doing this property valuation is to make sure we're not missing anything, right? And so the first thing we need to do is review the property and be able to figure out, we need to review the property and make sure we're not missing any little detail. And so there's a somewhat of a process that I go through when I'm doing this to ensure that I'm not missing anything, once again. And the process is I look for the bones of the property, so the framing, the structure, the things that I can't change. I'm getting a good feel for that throughout the entire property. Then I'm also trying to figure out what I can add to the property if I were to actually get it. So the amenities, the design, is there enough room for a pool table? What can I add to the yard? All these different little things are the additional things that I'd be adding, right? So you got your bones and the stuff that you will add to the property. I also want to make sure I'm reviewing the location of the property and also any work that needs to be done to that property. So it's sort of these four things. I don't think I'm missing anything there. It's those four things that you're going to be looking for as you're analyzing these homes. Now, the reason why it's so important that you do this is because the littlest things can change your revenue. These are two of my favorite examples. So the first one is, let's say in your buy box, you know that you need to have you need to have 2 living rooms, and in the second living room, you need to have a pool table and some additional games, and it needs to be fun for kids to be able to hang out in. However, what if you go and review a property and it has 2 living rooms, but the second living room is actually so small that you're not going to be able to fit a pool table in there? Is that going to affect your revenue? Yes or no? And if you can't get that pool table in there, what else can you get in there, and how is that going to affect your revenue? And that's like a really tiny example, because I've seen homes where the game room just kept shrinking and the amount of revenue per home kept shrinking along with it. And it was the most clear thing. It was like a smaller game room led to $10,000 less in revenue. And that could be a lot of your your profit that you'd be taking home, right? So we want to make sure we're paying attention to those things. Now, additionally, the other example is the backyard and the pool. So say you know that you need a pool within your home that you're getting, and you go and look and you find this home and it's got every single last thing that you're looking for. It's in the right location. It's got 4 bedrooms, it's got 2 living rooms, it's got 3 bathrooms, it's got a pool. The pool's even square shaped, and you're all excited about it. But then the issue is that there's nothing else in the backyard. It's just a pool. But you also know that all your competitors have a putting green and a jungle gym, and they have this additional space in the backyard, but you now no longer have that space with this property that you're looking at. Will that home still be able to compete without having that extra space in the backyard? The answer is no. But the thing is that's why we're going through this, to check for those things, to make sure that we're paying attention to every single little last detail to ensure we're not missing anything. Okay. So let's get into it. I'm going to analyze this one property that you can see right here. I've already gone through it a couple of times, but I'm going to show you every single thing that I am looking for or would be looking for when I'm reviewing this in the examples that I just gave you and in the process that I just explained of the bones, amenities, location, and what needs to be repaired. And so I'll do this one here, and then the next video I'm going to do a couple more, okay? So the first thing I'm actually going to do before I even get into these photos is I'm always reviewing to ensure I've got the right number of bedrooms and bathrooms, what size square footage it is. Can be misleading sometimes. You could have like 2,000 square feet, but half of it is in the master bedroom. So you just really want to make sure that you're not using this as your only metric for if the property is large enough. Also, how large is the property? This is almost on an entire acre, right? So there's a lot of land that I can work with here. And then once I usually review this, and again, I'm just memorizing all these things, right? So I just always have them in the back of my head so that when I'm reviewing all the other comps, I know I already know how it matches up with my property. We'll get into that, but just try to memorize everything that you can. Again, we're at the location now. If you've been watching all the videos, you know that vast majority of the properties are all along here. This one's way up here, which means that it's on the outskirts in comparison to the rest of these properties, which is nerve-wracking. I don't know exactly why that is, but it's a concern that I'm now going to have, which is probably going to end up in my main concerns, which, as you know, I did add it there. But that is what I'm doing. I'm just paying attention to where it's located in relation to the rest of the properties that I would be potentially looking into. Now, when we get into the property and we actually start looking at the photos, the first photo that I look at tells me so much, right? So first off, I can see that I have some sort of yard here. I can't see exactly how big it is. I can also see that there's a neighbor very close. So even though there's a lot of trees around here, we still have a neighbor that I can see, right? So the neighbor can see me. I can see the neighbor. We're not secluded, okay? I can see we have a good deck here, which is screened in. It's got a bit of a roof to it too. So it's kind of like a little sunroom. Which is good. I don't know exactly what it looks like just yet from this angle, but I know that we got something going on there. I can see that we have another deck that wraps around the side of the house, but it seems to be more of like a walkway rather than anything else. So I'm not going to be able to add much there. I can see they have a barbecue. I'll likely be able to get a barbecue there, and that's nice. Gravel driveway, which is probably just fine for this area. Now, obviously, it's a log cabin. That's a dead given. The roof itself is something that I would be potentially concerned with. I don't know this area extremely well. I can just, I don't know if this is a good roof or a bad roof. This is something where I'd refer to a realtor to let me know exactly if this is good or bad. Okay. But I'm paying attention to it. I can see down here as well. It's also, I want to call it sheet metal. I believe it's called sheet metal. Again, I don't know if this is a good or a bad thing, but I would be marking this down as something that I would potentially be looking into when the time came. Overall, it looks pretty solid, right? I can tell it's 2 stories as well. Now, when we get inside, this very first photo tells me a lot as well. I love that there's wood on the walls and on the ceiling and on the floors. Now, obviously, the wood floors are very standard, but the wood actually matches with the rest of the wood. I also like the quality of the wood that I'm looking at. So I can tell that it's good, high quality wood. It's not cheap wood that has been just put in here. There's definitely log cabins that you come across where it's just very, very cheap wood. I can also tell this is not tongue and groove wood that's on here either. So this is like actual wood that has been put into this wall and with the ceilings, which again makes it feel more like a log cabin. We can see that the kitchen over here has some green. I'm going to get some better photos of that. I can see that this living room itself is not very large, just based off of the way that they have it set up. I don't know if I would be able to get a bigger couch set up in here or what would be going on there, but I'd want to figure that out. But those are my first initial reactions with everything that I'm seeing just from looking at that first photo. The next photo brings me right to the kitchen, and I like it. I like it a lot. The reason I like it is because it fits the look and feel of this place, right, on the interior. So I'm already kind of getting a feel for what kind of design I actually would be pulling off with this property because it doesn't have any cabinets here. I like that they painted this green already. I like that this is all stainless steel. I'm not going to have to replace any of this. And the countertop is steel as well. I don't know if it's metal, it's steel. I don't know exactly what it is, but what you would refer to this. But regardless, it's good quality. I don't have to replace it. And it looks like really well with the rest of the wood that is within this property. So I like the kitchen a lot. Now I can actually see the living room from this angle. So we have a fireplace that's going on over here that seems to be taking up a good amount of room, but there's still a lot of like dead space that's going on here. So it's very likely that I would be able to fit a good sized bed in here, right? Or sorry, couch, a good sized couch along here, like a good L-size couch. I always like to have a nice large couch in my root places because they're very comfortable. And if I did that, then the couch would be going this way and the TV's on this side. So it would be easier for people to watch TV that way. It's something else I'm considering. When I see this, I don't like this at all. This bothers me because this is a really small space for a dining table. So what I might actually be considering is like, can I fit the dining table in this space right here? And if I could, then I would try and not have it there. I'm very keen on having a good dining space because it's a great feature to have for people in Airbnbs who are going to be spending time together, usually playing cards or eating breakfast or something along those lines. But I'd also consider if I could potentially build that bench into the wall and make this wall a seat, and then the table kind of fits in here, and I'd be able to slide it right into the wall there. Now, is that going to cost extra money? Yes. Is it worth it? I don't know, right? And then we keep going. I can see we've got this good outdoor deck space, which is what I was trying to see before. And it's a good size. So we got a full size picnic table here. There's also more space over there. I can see there's a lot of light coming in through the top, which I believe it's see-through, right? So it's not like a sheet metal that's you can't see through. So we got tons and tons of light here. And obviously this furniture is not what I'd be keeping in there, but I can see that there's enough space to be adding like a good sized seating all around the walls, the edge of the walls here, and then probably a propane fire pit with a lot of hanging lights. There's a good amount of space that I can do some stuff with. Now, as we get up here, you can see we have a good amount of space up here. And then I go to the next photo and you can see there's even more space and it doesn't look like a bedroom. And if you see this pole that's right here as well, that pole is right there. So what I can see is that we have a bit of space this way. So you come up the stairs, you have some space here. And then there's even more on this side. And even I can see even more over here. And my initial thought when I first looked at this was, is this an extra living room or is this an open bedroom? And so what I would have done at this point is actually just gone and looked for the additional bedrooms. So I can see here's one bedroom, and I know this is a 2-bedroom, right? So I can see this is one bedroom, and then I can see that this is obviously clearly a 2nd bedroom. And so what that then tells me is that extra space up there is actually extra space. It's an extra living room space. And so now I know with this space here, what I could be doing is adding things into this to give me a competitive advantage. So now my thoughts go to, can I add a pool table in here? Is there enough room for a pool table? If not, what other games could I be getting into here? How could I be adding it? Can I maybe even get some additional sleeping in here? Maybe a Murphy bed up against the wall if possible, maybe a TV up here as well. Just really trying to analyze all my options with this because I didn't realize I was going to have a additional living room, right? And then when we keep going, I've got, we've seen all these photos, all these different angles. Again, back to these bedrooms, what I want to mention quickly is that a lot of the times bedrooms can actually look very, very similar. Especially with like new builds, the bedrooms will look almost identical from one to another. And when you're reviewing a property, you're trying to find some sort of competitive advantage with that property. And sometimes people will list a home as a 4-bedroom, but it actually has an additional office to it as well, or something along those lines that could be converted into another bedroom. And then therefore you're buying a 4-bedroom that's technically a 5-bedroom as an Airbnb. And that's going to give you a competitive advantage. So I always make sure to count out every bedroom to ensure that I see them. And one thing that I always do is look at the windows or something like this that would be unique, right? So obviously the roof is slanted here and I can see the window, the way it looks. And I would memorize those things so that when I went and looked at the next bedroom, I would make sure that it was completely different. And usually the windows are the best teller for that, the windows and closets. So obviously these two are extremely different from one another, and it's super obvious that this is a completely different bedroom. But there's other examples that I'll be getting into where it's not very obvious, and you want to make sure you're counting the bedrooms and trying to see if there's an extra one that was not accounted for whatever reason. Usually just being an office. Anyways, let's keep going from here. This is the additional bathroom. I don't expect much for bathrooms here. This is, it is what it is. It doesn't need to be much more than this. It's a log cabin in Fairbanks, so we're good with that. This is the one that's a full bath, and we can see, again, not that big of a deal. I might change out this tile, but to be honest, I probably wouldn't. I would just leave it as is and call it a day and just save the money because it's not going to drive too much revenue. Now with this photo, I can actually see the front yard. Now I know I have almost an acre's worth of land here. However, this seems to be the only cleared off space, right? And so I can see that there's a fire pit space already set up over here, which is awesome, right? They've already cleared it. It's a good size too. It can definitely fit a lot of chairs around that, hanging lights, different things like that. And then over here, I have a ton of front yard space that I could be adding a bunch of different amenities to, whatever those may be. I would review the other properties to see what sort of amenities would make sense there. And there's just another shot of it and gives me more confirmation that this roof is see-through. So adding in more light, tons of space, as we can see. So lots that we can do. And then we get into the basement of the property, and it looks like this basement is more of a crawl space than an actual basement, maybe less. It's just maybe not a crawl space either, but it's a basement that I wouldn't be able to comfortably walk around in, and neither would anybody else. And so likely is just going to be storage. Probably just use it for the maid or cleaner of this property. And so not much to be going on here, but I can see we have a washer and dryer, which is great as well, and likely expected with this type of home. And so as we continue, we're back in the kitchen. I think we've seen everything for this home. Okay, so the only last thing we have here is the deck that was wraparound. Again, we already knew that this wasn't going to be too large, but we're getting some additional side shots of the property and different things that we would need to see or want to see. And this photo actually would be pretty deceiving because we know that we could see the neighbors right over there. And so it looks secluded from this photo. This also looks like a great shot, but in reality, it's not as secluded as it's appearing in this photo. And so now what I've just done is I've reviewed all of the bones of this property and every single last little detail and figured out, everything that might be a factor I would need to consider with it. And, especially referring to what kind of money I need to put into the property, potentially, like for repairs, which for this property, there's obviously not a ton. From what we can see, obviously we need to talk to a realtor to figure those things out and get the inspection, but when that time comes. But for the most part, if I just run back through this as I now know the bones. What are the amenities and advantages and things I could do to this property that would allow me to compete with this home, right? So I know up here I can add, a ton of hanging lights, really nice seating area, a little propane place. I know right over here to the left I have a fire pit, so that's awesome. I'd most likely want to get a hot tub somewhere out here, probably right around here as close as I can to the deck so people can walk right into it. And then I have this huge lawn space where I'm probably going to add in cornhole, horseshoes, maybe a volleyball net, all these different little things that I could potentially be putting into this property would add into the front. Again, I would try and pull from some additional ideas either from people in Fairbanks or other markets like Fairbanks. In the living room space here, I'm probably going to get a nice L couch set up in here with some additional seating on this side and probably even put in a pull-out couch here just to be able to sleep more people. And then when it comes to the kitchen, I'd keep as is. And then the dining room, I'd be adding in that additional space or potentially putting a bench into that if I thought it made sense, or at least a nicer table or a different, I don't know, I'd be doing something with this, to be honest. I would know that that's something that I would need to be working on and figuring out. I've already talked about the outdoor space up here, and then this would probably be my biggest project or biggest moneymaker outside of, other than the outside. This would be where I'd be spending a lot of time to figure out exactly how to maximize this space to really elevate it and bring it to life. I would likely be putting a shuffleboard along this side, a TV up here. I'd be putting a pool table back here. I'd be putting some seating. Probably don't need a neon light or anything like that in here, but something that mentions that this is a game room, and probably getting foosball table in here as well if I could. Maybe an arcade game or two up along the walls. Those would be all the different things that I'd want to really bring to life with that property or that room, which would bring it to life. The bedrooms, I'd just keep them as is, and bedrooms aren't overly complicated. Bathrooms, I'd keep them as is, and everything else is pretty straightforward, right? So that's every last little detail about this property. And as you can tell, it took me like 15 minutes to go through everything that I wanted to see with this property. Now, mind you, I'm speaking it out loud to you and trying to make sure that I'm covering every single last little detail as I go through it. It typically would not take as long going through it. But what I want you to one more time keep in mind is I'm reviewing the bones of the property. I'm reviewing how I'm going to add in the amenities. I'm reviewing what I might need to repair with this home, because that's going to matter when it comes to underwriting. Do I need to put $100,000 more into this property to get it to where it needs to be, or do I need to only put in like $25,000? Right? That's going to be a factor when it comes to that point. And then on top of that, where is it located? Okay, so all of those things matter greatly, and obviously this property has a ton of advantages to it. So that's everything that I'd be doing. Now I've got that all memorized in my head for when the time comes that I can then go and add in all this information. But it's going to matter when I'm comparing it directly up against these other comps, so I can review those comps to make sure I'm not missing anything with those comps and know exactly how they relate to this property that I just reviewed. Now, anybody who's watching this, I'm going to be doing this 2 more times in the next video. You don't need to watch it if you feel like you get it, right? If you're like, I got it, it doesn't matter, right? But I'm going to do a property that's going to be for a rental arbitrage property. And I'm also going to be doing one that's going to be in Florida that's like got a pool and kind of the things you'd be looking at for something along those lines, right? Just different scenarios so you can see different ways of looking at an actual property to understand what to be looking for. So I hope this has been helpful to anybody who watched it. Again, you don't need to watch the next one if you feel like you're good to go, But for those who do want that extra practice, I'll be doing it again in the next video, and I'll see you there. How's it going, everybody? Okay, so for this video, what we're going to be mainly doing is learning what comparable properties from your buy box should you be bringing into your property evaluation template. Okay, at this point, you've obviously completed building a buy box, you've evaluated the property, and we're getting ready to add the most comparable properties from your buy box to your property evaluation sheet, right? And what I'm going to be using is actually the Fairbanks buy box example for this analysis. Now, the Fairbanks one is very straightforward, so it's not going to be too complicated. So I am going to be going into I'm going to do a Gatlinburg example, which is far more complicated. And I'm going to show you exactly how we use that one to make sense of it. But we're going to start off nice and simple with the Fairbanks one, okay? So first thing I'm going to do is show you that I added in this information here. So I've already added this in here. I didn't want to waste your time. It's very, very straightforward. Just grab the either realtor.com link or the Zillow.com link, whatever it is, and add that in there. Make sure to add your address up top and also down here as well. What we're going to do is we're going to go over to the buy box to be able to figure out exactly what properties we're going to be adding in here. And we want these ones to be the most comparable properties to the property that we're evaluating. And again, this is going to be the property we're evaluating. It's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, 1,200, almost 1,300 square feet on an acre lot. We know generally where it's located. Again, for this particular property in Fairbanks, it is very straightforward what we're doing right now, okay? So I go over to my buy box. I click onto the Fairbanks tab. If you have multiple different tabs, obviously just grab whichever tab is most relatable to you. I'm going to move myself over here. And the reason why this is so straightforward with Fairbanks is because we only have, a handful of pieces of data that is actually useful that we're going to use. But even with this minimal data, there's only select pieces of information that we actually should be using and not using. And we can go from there. When you have more minimal data, this portion is really, really easy. You're just simply, adding it over to your template. But it's going to make, when you have minimal data, it actually makes the evaluation process more difficult rather than just figuring out what comps are the best ones to use. But regardless of that, let me just walk you through how I do this. So I know we have a 2-bedroom, and for anyone who doesn't remember all these properties, I'll just open them up right now so you can take a look at them. So just sort of a refresher. The very first one here is a 5-bedroom, 3-bath with beautiful views. It's not a log cabin, but it's a massive home, and it's not even remotely comparable to what we're doing. And that one's making $144,000 a year. So when I see that, I just don't see that as being comparable to us in any way. Even with all this minimal data, I don't need to bring that in to my evaluation sheet because it's not going to be comparable at all. Okay. The next one, I don't really truly believe still. I honestly should just delete it out of here, but I'm not going to. I'm going to stay true and keep it in there just in case. And then the next one I can look at is going to be this one, right? Which is going to be waterfront. It's a 3-bedroom. We're a 2-bedroom. We're not very far off from that one. Then I can review the next one. I can see it's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. We're also a 2-bedroom. However, they're waterfront. And you can kind of continue to do this as you keep going through and trying to determine like which ones are comparable, which ones are not. Okay. And essentially what would end up realizing is that pretty well all of these down here are going to be comparable. Okay. Because the bottom one is a log cabin, which is what we're looking at. And it's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. It's very comparable. This one's going to be slightly smaller and it's not that good of a listing, but we'll get into that and why that's referred to as a bottom comp. Additionally, so I would have gone through each one of these and decided that based off of everything that I'm seeing, the comps that I want to bring in are going to be actually all of these ones that you can see here, because they're going to be the most comparable to my listing. The only one that probably I don't need to bring in is maybe this 6-bedroom here. And the 6-bedroom is obviously a much larger property. However, it's doing as well as these ones here. And so I want to keep it within my data set just in case I can logically understand why this one's doing as well as this one, even though they're a significantly different size, and try to see if maybe I can pull something from this piece of information that would allow me to figure out how much I think my property is going to make. More data is always better data. Having a minimum of 5 comps is like a rule of thumb. If once you get to 4 or 3, it's going to be really hard to understand, how well your property is actually doing to have that 100% confidence that you need to really believe the property is going to do well. So, trying to get as much data in there as you possibly can is going to be very beneficial. So I'm going to grab all of these ones here because they are all fairly comparable. They're mostly 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms. And I'm going to copy all of this information here. So just going to copy that. And then I'm going to bring it over to my information here. I'm going to go click into this cell right there and paste it. So you right click, paste, it's going to go. I just did the shortcut on my keyboard. One thing you can notice is that we don't have any information up here. And additionally, you'll notice that I didn't grab this comp, but we still have this comp to go. So to just, it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to click on this row right here. When you click on the row, it highlights everything in the row. And then I'm going to copy this and I'm going to bring it over here. I'm going to go underneath this one here and I'm going to paste that. And then I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to grab all of these titles. Okay. So again, I'm clicking on that right there. I'm going to copy it and come over here. I'm going to paste all that information in. So now we have all that information pasted in. So now what I have is out of all of the Fairbanks data, I have now narrowed it down to the data that I trust the most, that is the most relatable to the property, with only one really being not all that relatable, but I'm just going to keep it in there. And in total, I have 7 comps. So you can see I have 7 different listings in here. I guess you can see it right there. I have 7 different listings in here, and that should be enough information for me to be able to determine how profitable I believe that this property is going to end up being. Okay. And so that is the process that you would typically go through to add what comps you think are most relatable to your property into your property valuation template, right? Again, for Fairbanks, this is ridiculously easy because we only have 1 that doesn't really compare and 2 that we don't trust, and we pretty well brought everything else in. Whereas if you take a market like Gatlinburg, which is significantly larger and there's so much more going on and so many different nuances to the data, it gets a little bit more complicated. So I recently did a project, or I guess you call it a project, where I had to evaluate a whole bunch of different unit sizes. So all the way from 6 bedroom to 2 bedroom. And I was looking at properties that had a view with a pool, no view but a pool, view but no pool, and no view and no pool. And I had to do that for every single different bedroom count that I went through, okay? And so naturally, I didn't actually build a buy box for this. And there's going to be times where you're going to do a property valuation on a new market or a specific property, and you're not going to go through the entire process of building the buy box. You could, but I'm just telling you probably end up happening that you won't sometimes. It's very useful to do it when you're entering into a market, but just sometimes won't happen, okay? And so as you can see here, I have all of the data for the 6 bedrooms all the way to the 2 bedrooms. And I had gone through every single one of these and made notes on everything that I was seeing. I marked off which ones I thought were, like the top properties, the best looking ones. And I actually added an additional column in here called view, where I ranked the level of the view that the different properties had. This is something that's a little bit different, and definitely something that you can do with your property if that time were ever to come. However, the reason I'm explaining this to you is because I have this sheet, which is obviously a big old sheet of a lot of data, way more than what we had in Fairbanks data. And I had to be able to, pull out the comps that I thought were going to be the most relatable and comparable to the property that I was analyzing. And so what I would do is I would click over here and remove all of the different comps and just grab the ones that were the bedroom count that I was evaluating for that time period. So I could do the 6 bedrooms. I'm not going to do the 6 bedrooms just because it's not as much information there. Let's do the 4 bedrooms instead to kind of show you more data. So as you can see, I have here I have, 15 different comps. You really only need anywhere from 8 to 12 is like your best case scenario because you're going to get such a good pattern in that data. And you can see I have, just under $100,000 of a variance from the top to the bottom. So there's a lot of information here, a lot of data to figure out. However, if you were to be those different analysis that I had to do, I had to figure out if it had a view and a pool or no view and a pool, things like that. Okay. And so what I did was I ranked all the views. So for this scenario, what I could do is I could remove the comps that I thought did not have a view, or at least did not have a good view. And I could keep anybody in here who I thought had a really strong view, right? Let's see, I got 10, 7, 12. I'm going to keep the person with the 5 in there as well. So these are all rankings of how good I thought the view was. Whoops, I meant to take that one off. And as you can see, we have now narrowed it down to 8 comps. So now I have 8 comps that are again, in that exact same range of who's doing the best to who's doing the worst. And these would be all of the properties that I've analyzed that I know have a decent view, and I need to review all these properties to figure out, how well they compare to the property that I'm about to analyze. Okay, so at this stage, what I would have done is taken this information and then plotted it into the property valuation template. And the reason being, again, is because it met the criteria of being a 4-bedroom, met the criteria of having a view, and I've already gone through it and confirmed that it's good data. I've already gone through and highlighted all of the information, and now I'm using this to then take it and put it into my template. Now, you may be thinking like, hey, that's a really big gap here that you have, and that is the case. However, this isn't a bad thing, because what we're going to be figuring out is where does our property fall within this range, okay? And really, you should know these properties generally after going through them or reviewing them. And so sometimes you can, I can have 8 comps here left, but I could potentially go this one making 214 and this one doing 206. I know are just not even remotely comparable to what we're looking at. And so because of that, I'm not going to include these two in my analysis. I'm just going to grab everything below. Now you're left with only 6, but at least you still have 6. Okay, so you have those 6 comps. You can take those comps, you can bring them and put them over there into your template. Now, additionally, say the view didn't matter and I had all of these different properties to review. What I could be doing again is it's going to come down to the actual properties themselves. So say I didn't care about the view, even though the view would be such a big factor. Let's pretend the view was not a serious thing here, okay? Or it was not a factor here. And I just had this many 4 bedrooms that I wanted to analyze to try and figure out how well my property was going to do. Well, what I would be doing is I would be opening up all of these listings, and I would try to see which ones I knew for a fact we would not do as well as. And if I knew without a doubt that we weren't going to beat those properties, then I wouldn't even bring them into the evaluation template, because it's a bit of a waste of a time. However, you do want to bring in some properties that you do think are slightly better than you, or maybe your best case scenario where it's like if you do everything right, you could get to that point. I tend to bring in properties that I know for a fact that I can't beat, but not the ones that are like above and beyond. So let's say these 3 here, I know without a doubt it's not even remotely closer in a different sort of stratosphere, right? But these ones here, I also don't think I can beat these ones, these 5. So I might bring in these 3 to just prove, hey, we're not going to make $180,000 a year because these ones are clearly better than us, right? However, we do have the potential to maybe make around 150, and then you use these ones as a base. So just as I would bring in properties that I'm fairly confident we're not going to be able to beat, I'm also going to bring in the properties that I'm really confident that we are going to be able to beat. And I'm going to get into all this logic as we get into it. It all makes sense as we continue to go through. But essentially, you're trying to find a good range between 8 to 12 properties that are very comparable to you, with a couple or a few that are definitely better than you, and a couple or a few that are definitely worse than you. And hopefully the data, you have enough data to be able to prove that. If not, sometimes what you're going to have to do is just pull in whatever data you have, which is exactly what we did for Fairbanks. We just literally grabbed all of the good data and just put it in there, and we're going to do our best to make sense of it as we get into it. Whereas Gatlinburg, we can get into like the weeds and remove the ones with the bad views, ones with pools, ones that are maybe a little bit too large, and then we still have a good amount of comps that we can use to actually evaluate the properties. So I hope that these sort of examples that I'm running you through and the ways to think about this gives you an understanding of like what properties to be pulling in here. Again, 8 to 12, ideally, few better, a few that are better than yours, a few that are a little bit worse, all within a same general range, but properties that look like your property for the most part. And that's going to give us enough information to be able to find a pattern within that data to be able to evaluate the property and make a decision. I would say don't overcomplicate it. Okay, it isn't too complicated, and the more you get into the practice of doing this, the more it'll be understandable as to which ones are comps and which ones are not. Okay, and so that's everything for this, and we'll get into the next step, which is going to be a lot more difficult than this one. But we'll see you in the next one. How's it going, everybody? So this is probably going to be the most difficult part that you will do out of anything within the entire course training whatsoever. This part is the hardest. And the reason being is because there's so many factors that you're going to be going through to be able to figure out and determine what the 100% confidence number should be for a specific property. You have to use a lot of logic. You have to use a lot of reasoning. You have to consider every single last possibility. And I'm going to try my best to give you enough examples and different scenarios to help you understand how to evaluate these different properties. But it's going to be hard, okay? And it's okay if you're not getting it right off the bat. I've done this hundreds of times now, and that's the only reason that I've been able to have so much confidence to actually be able to teach it. But there are a lot of nuances to this section. And just to explain what we're doing, because I should have mentioned that right from the beginning, is we are using all of the comps that we've just added in. We're going to be making notes on them, figuring out exactly how they compare to the property that we're evaluating. Then we are going to reason with ourselves as to why we believe our property is going to make X. And that is essentially the grand scenario. So we're going to be figuring out what the 100% revenue number is. And then we're going to figure out the best case and the worst case as well. And for a very long time, I told people this was all I did. All I did was I figured out what the 100% confidence number should be for a property that you're going to be potentially Airbnb-ing it if you do X, Y, and Z. And so what you're going to see me do right now is break down this Fairbanks property that I've already analyzed. And I'm going to walk you through the process that I went through and the logic that I used to be able to get the answer that I have. Now, again, this is complicated. There's other videos that are going to be in here that you can watch where you see me do it live. There should be other ones where I walk through a similar sort of analysis, just like I'm doing right now. So if you don't get it right off the bat, and if you can't just take what I learned right now and then go and apply it and get it right 100% of the time, that's completely normal. I'm actually in the process of hiring. I've already hired 3 people to do this for my clients on an ongoing basis for anybody who needs this done for them. And those 3 people are still in training after 2.5 months. So they've been doing this for 2.5 months, and they've passed what I refer to as level 1 training, where they can analyze a property within a major city where it's easier because there's a ton of data, but they haven't been able to pass level 2 or 3 or anything along those lines. And so it is a difficult process to do. For some people, other people, you guys can get it. That's no problem. But let me just walk you through this one. If it doesn't make sense, watch the other videos, okay? I'm going to stop explaining that and we'll just get into it. So for this property, which is this property here, once again, just as a refresher, it is the log cabin. And as a quick refresher, as we always know, the very first step is to review and memorize the property. I'm not going to go into all the details. You would have already seen it, but I'm just looking at the property again for myself right before I make this video, where I can see the outside the deck. I can see the upstairs, the pool table room. I know there's a good kitchen. I know there's a good living room. I know there's a fire pale on the inside. There's 2 rooms. We have potentially space for 6 people if we get some people in the living room. And then we have a good sized outdoor space. Additionally, we have almost a full acre. And all in all, it's a pretty solid looking property with a lot of character to it. Okay. Again, 2 bedroom, 1 bath that we're evaluating. And we already brought in all of the comps that we would have brought in over here. So those are all of the main comps that we were to bring in, with one of them being a 6 bedroom, but the rest being 2 bedrooms to 3 bedrooms. Okay. And so now what I have to do is I have to review each one of these individual properties and try to make notes down here as to how they directly compare to my property, and if I think my property can beat them or not, and why. Okay. And you're going through, and that's exactly what you're thinking to yourself over and over and over again. Can I beat this property? Yes or no, and why? And essentially, what ends up happening, just as painting a picture here for what's going to happen, is that we have a range between $88,000 and $56,000. Okay, so we're looking at about $22,000 here, range from top to bottom. And I've got to figure out, is my property have the ability to beat these ones up here and do as well as these ones? If so, will I make $85,000 confidently, or am I going to fall in the middle of all of these, and I'm actually going to end up somewhere in the middle here, making around maybe $75,000 because I can't beat these homes, but I know for a fact I can beat these homes, and therefore I'm going to end up in the middle, right? Or is my property very, very comparable to these bottom ones, and then therefore I'm most likely going to end up around $55,000 a year with maybe a potential to make $65,000 because these ones are super, super comparable to my property, right? That is, in a sense, what's going to happen and what you're trying to figure out. You're trying to figure out where your property is going to fall within this range. Kind of think of it like this. If a year were to go by and all these numbers and these properties were still here, and you ran that property as an Airbnb for an entire year, at the end of the year, how much money did that property make, and which where would it fall in this range, right? Let's say, did it make 80,000? If it did, then it's going to be now slipped into in between these two. And that's exactly where it would end up showing up next year if all these properties made the exact same amount of money and you made $80,000 at the end of the year. It would fall right in between there. Or is it going to make 55,000 and therefore it's going to fall right at the bottom down here? It's just going to be below all these comps or above all these comps. Where is that your property going to fall within this range if you were to be managing it for an entire year based off of what these properties look like? Can you beat them? Can you not beat them? Okay. I think you get the logic and what we're trying to do here. It's pretty straightforward when I explain it that way, but the nuances of all the little details can get a little confusing. And also, I'm glad I'm doing this Fairbanks property because it's fairly complicated. It's one of these ones that has a lot of nuances to it, and I'm excited to go through it. So the very first property that we're going to look at is going to be this one here. Okay. And again, I've already memorized our property, so I know all the details of it. I know what it looks like. I know how it compares to these properties. And the very first thing I see is that this person can sleep 10 guests and has 3 bedrooms. This is where you should always look first to confirm how comparable it is. Mainly really taking a look at the guests. You want to see, do the guests matter or not? Okay. Some people go with the heads in bed strategy and they'll have 16 plus people in there. And you'll see that all the top properties will have 16 plus. And if that's the case, you have to be able to do that. Okay. That's one of the first things you want to look for. Typically with a more luxury property, you're going to have less people sleeping in there because they don't cram all together. But most properties are going to probably fall in the middle. Sometimes it's a factor and you can see a trend that everybody has, 16 guests, but sometimes it'll be like a couple people do and a couple people don't. Therefore, it's not that big of a factor. Okay. That's one way to think about the guests. Obviously, the number of beds is going to matter as well, but also how many bedrooms and bathrooms. Typically, I want you to be only focusing on people that have, the same number of bedrooms. But for this scenario, we have to focus on 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, and 1 6-bedroom. Okay. So that's the first part. Now, the next thing is looking into the photos. I kind of like to look at these first 5 just to see, the first 5 photos will always tell you if it's a good listing or not, because if they're all different photos and they're showing off interesting things, then it's a good listing. Now, these guys did a great job with this first photo and this first photo. Even this is well done as well, but these two are super boring and they don't really show off anything fun or interesting about the property, which is hurting their ability to be profitable. I can also see they're on the water. Being on the water is obviously going to be a huge factor in comparison to our property, which is not on the water. So that's the number one thing that's in the back of my head is these guys are on the water, right? I can also see that the home itself is not a cabin. So if I just look at the home from the outside, I can see it's not a cabin whatsoever. It's got good deck space on both sides. It's got a good lawn to it as well. And so I'm thinking to myself, I have a good lawn. I technically have a sunroom. My home's not nearly as large as this, but we're a cabin and they're not a cabin. And so we have that character to us, which is going to help drive revenue because people with Airbnbs are always looking for something unique and interesting. And a cabin definitely helps with that, especially in a place like Alaska. But anyway, so that's a factor that I'm considering, right? And so then when I review the interior of the home, I can see that it's very boring and plain on the inside. It's the walls are the beigey color, which to me is just super boring and it's not fun or exciting. It's not really in pulling me in and making me want to book the home in any way. The kitchen itself is super plain as well. I can just tell already that this entire home is very plain in its design. The photos are done well, which is a factor, which is okay, even though it's plain, it feels clean, it feels safe, it feels reliable. That's kind of what I'm getting from this property. But everything else that I'm seeing it's just, there's no life, there's no fun to this property. And that's actually going to be a pattern for most of Fairbanks. They don't really have all out properties, but I can just see it's a lot larger. They didn't do anything with the garage. They didn't do anything in the backyard. They barely even added anything up here. And so for the most part, it's a larger property. It's sitting on the water, but it has no character to it. It's very suburban home, but it is larger. And so the way that I ended up writing this one up was this right here. I said, we would not be able to beat this home because it's on the water and larger than us. I see those as being 2 major factors. However, it's not designed well and it's not a log cabin, which may be our only advantage, right? So I know that I can design a home better than what I'm currently seeing there. I can make it look really fun, cool, all those things that can add amenities. And we have the log cabin. I've mentioned that multiple times. That's an advantage that we could potentially have. However, we will likely not be able to do as well as them or better than them, right? So I'm telling myself, I don't think that we can do as well as this property or beat them simply because they're on the water and they're larger, right? So those two factors, I'm like, it's just I don't think we can do it. And that's how I rated it up. So to me, this is what property that I refer to as a top comp. So this is a property that we can't beat. It's even in our best case scenario, it's going to be really difficult to do as well as them, just simply because of the bones and structure of their property, right? And so then I move on to the next one. And when I look at the next one, it's a very similar scenario, but it's a smaller property. And so it's a 5 bedroom with, 5 guests, 2 bedrooms, and 1 bath. And I know we have a 2 bedroom, 1.5 bath, which is great. We're probably going to sleep 6 people. They're sleeping 5. Those things are great and comparable, but again, it's on the water. As you can tell, like water and views, those things are always going to be huge, huge revenue drivers for any property ever. And so when you see a property that has those things, you have to understand that they're making a lot of their money simply because of that. And so again, I see a nice hot tub. We can definitely add a hot tub. We don't have a deck like this, but we do have a big yard. They didn't do anything in their yard from what I can see here. They just have a picnic table going on, but that deck itself is great and they're on the water. So even though this property would technically be the same size as us, they're on the water, right? And I can say that over and over again, but that's the factor. And then the interesting thing is actually when you go look inside, the listing is not as boring as the last one, let's say. It's a better kitchen. We've got a little bit more sort of life with the way that they've put things together. Even the photos themselves look a little bit better as well. And so to me, what I'm thinking is we're going to have a log cabin, right? With like a rustic fun, or it's not, maybe not fun, but like the kitchen itself is going to sort of suit the log cabin. And I'm thinking to myself, do these two compare, right? How well do they compare? And personally, I always assume that something that has a lot of character compares best with something that is done well like this. So I wouldn't call this luxury by any means, but I would say it's more modern, well put together. And because of that, it's very clean and it compares well with something that has a lot of character. So the people who want that sort of consistency and clean and something reliable, they're going to go with this. People who want like fun and enjoyable and whatnot will go with the cabin. Okay. And I see those two as just very, very comparable. Whereas the last kitchen, it's very clean. It's also really boring, right? Like I'm not trying to say that people are not booking this home because it doesn't have a fun, nice, clean kitchen. It is a good quality kitchen. It's just not this type of kitchen, which obviously nowadays is a better kitchen in a lot of people's eyes. Okay. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that this property itself, the building, the structure, the frame is very comparable to something that we would do. Okay. Now, mind you, we would have the pool table over them. We would have a little bit more character. We could do things in our backyard that they didn't do. We could still design ours a little bit better. But in reality, most of this is going to be fairly comparable, but they're on the water. Okay. And so again, what I come down to is everything is the same other than the fact that they're on the water. Therefore, it's unlikely that we're going to be able to beat them. And the way that I wrote this one up is we're not going to be able to beat them mainly due to the fact that they're waterfront. It's funny because I wrote this up a couple days ago. The property isn't perfect. However, it is modern on the inside, and that likely would directly compete or compare with our log cabin. We can't beat this home. Okay, so I forgot the word beat there, but we can't beat this home. You'll notice a lot of spelling errors in my typing is because I do it quick because it doesn't matter, I guess what I'm trying to say. So anyways, I got two now that I believe that we're not going to beat, and they're both, one's doing 88, the other one's doing 86. Okay. So that's telling me those are my top properties where I'm like, I don't feel 100% confident that we can do that well. I know that they're going to do better than us. Therefore, I don't think we're going to do that amount. Okay. Now the next one here is the really large farmhouse in town 6-bedroom. And what I was trying to figure out with this home is it extremely well designed? Is it have a lot of like great features and amenities? Is it a great listing and it's just not performing well even as a 6-bedroom? But really what I found out is that, or what I realized is, first off, the photos aren't as nice as some of the other photos we were just looking at. They're definitely iPhone photos. They added some nice features here to give it a little bit of a design and whatnot. But it's super boring. It's so boring. There's nothing really going on with this home. When you even get to the kitchen itself, it's a dated kitchen and the photos are really dark. They're kind of all over the place. The dining table's like tucked into the kitchen. They've got a good sized couch here, but like the photos are kind of all over the place too. As you notice, we're in the kitchen, then we get one photo of the living room. These little things make a difference. These photos here are actually a little bit better in order. But there's nothing interesting. This is an extra living room that they have. and it's like an office, and they put a couch in it rather than putting a pool table in it or something along those lines. And then they also did nothing on the outside either, right? So in other words, these people, the only thing about this property that is allowing it to do the revenue that it's doing is simply because it sleeps 6 people, or sorry, it's a 6 bedroom place. Other than that, there's no reason why anyone else would want to book this over any of the other homes you could get in the Fairbanks area that would be more unique or cool or waterfront or whatever it may be. And so when I see this, I go, all right, it's only making money because of its size. That's not very comparable to what we're doing. There's nothing special about it. And so the way that I wrote this one up, if I remember correctly, is not a very comparable property. It is much larger, and it would be impossible to gauge if designing our home better and adding amenities would allow us to do better than them, because there's no data to prove it. So what I'm saying is, like, if I design my home amazingly and I put all these amenities, it's still not an apples to apples comparison to this home where it's apples and bananas. It's two different revenue drivers. One size, one is, fun cabin, whatever, right? So therefore, this cannot be a very comparable property, and I shouldn't have even really brought it in as a property to compare in the first place, okay? But now I know that, okay? Then from there, what I would do is move on to the next one. So this is going to be our bush plane hangar home, and I can see that it sleeps 8 people. We technically could sleep 8 people if we got 2 people on a Murphy bed in the upstairs pool table room, and then a couple down in the living room. However, they're 3 bedroom. They only have 1 bath, but they're a 3 bedroom. And so they're going to have more space than us, and they can actually get everybody on beds, which is going to be a bit of a difference. Well, now, again, I'm looking at these first 5 photos, and what I can notice is that it's a way better looking listing than most of the listings that we've been looking at. Like, it's obviously newer built. It's got this nice roof to it, which is pretty cool. It's obviously in a hangar, an airplane hangar, and they've got 3 photos about like how you're right there with these planes, which is making it pretty unique and interesting and fun. And so when I see this, my first initial thought is that it's a clean listing. And I think to myself, these other ones weren't as great of listings on the interior, whereas this one is actually well put together. The photos aren't amazing. It's not really all that much fun, but regardless, it's still clean, like really, really clean. And so I think to myself, like, I know I'm going to be at that level of cleanliness and design and making people feel like they're getting a really good stay with the home that they'd be purchasing. And on top of that, I probably would do better, right? Because I'd have the pool table, it'd be more character to it. Now, here's the complicated part. Does my cabin that's remote compare with their bush plane hangar uniqueness, right? It's like 2 completely different things altogether. Even this bush plane hangar is so unique. And you're going to run into this sometimes where you have such a unique thing that you have to try and compare with, and it's almost impossible to compare with it. But when I look at this property, I think to myself, I know that our home, maybe won't be the same size, but we're going to offer the same level of quality of a property. Like, it's going to be just as nice as this property. It will have more of a privacy on the outdoor space, which people might like a little bit more. And we're not going to have the uniqueness of a hangar and airplanes and whatnot, but we will have the uniqueness of the cabin and the outside, right? Which I keep bringing up. And so my thought instantly is we might be close to this. Okay. So this is where you start getting to the maybe scenario, right? Like, where the first 2 was like, no, we're not going to beat this, right? We're not going to beat this one. I don't think we're going to beat this one either because of the waterfront. Then we get to this one, we're like, it's not really comparable. And then when we look at this one, you go, maybe, right? You look at it and go, maybe. And this is where what starts happening as the revenue starts dipping, the homes quality and the way they look start kind of going down a little bit. The uniqueness, the revenue drivers, they kind of start going down a little bit, and it gets a little bit closer to where you would be. And that's where you start getting into this range where it's like, well, it might, but I'm not 100% confident that it will. And so when I see this, that's exactly how I feel about this property, where I'm like, maybe we can do as well as this by offering as consistent and clean of a listing with our own unique feature, right? And so the way that I would have ended up writing this one up is might be comparable to ours, because they're new and unique and it's a solid listing. Whereas ours has a lot of character, making it unique, and we would do more on the outside in comparison to them. Okay. And so that's how my brain sees this. It's a maybe scenario. I can see ways that I can compete with them. Right. Now, on to the next one. This one here is the log cabin. And this log cabin pisses me off, if I'm being completely honest. And the reason it bothers me is because if you actually look at the revenue range for this, the log cabin's doing about 79,000, which is so close to all of these, right? All of these ones are so close together. And, we're saying right now that maybe we could do around here. And then when we see the log cabin, this should be our most comparable property. But what bothers me about it is that it's such a bad listing. The photos are so bad on the interior of this property that when you compare it to this bush plane one that has a lot cleaner photos, you're thinking to yourself, like, why would somebody book this with all these really bad photos? And how is this property almost making the exact same as the bush plane one? And this happens, right? Where I've already done this a couple of times where I don't feel 100% confident about the data. It makes sense. Like I can logically reason it to myself as to why it is doing this well. Because if you do look at the photos, yes, they're not great photos, but this photo is technically tells you everything you need to know about this property. It's got true logs on the inside, all the way up here as well. It's high ceilings. You've got a bedroom up there. You've got a good sized dining table. You've got a good sized living room. You've got an older kitchen, but you've got a kitchen, right? And so in other words, the photos, even though they're bad, they still paint enough of a picture to be like, okay, I could feel comfortable enough to book this home. Plus it's a log cabin. How cool is that? It gives you the character. So what I'm trying to say is there's this uneasiness inside of me that says I don't fully believe this data, but I can understand why it might be doing as well, right? And my reasoning is it most likely is doing this well because because it is a log cabin. Just had a tickle in my throat there. Because it is a log cabin, and so because it's a log cabin, I think that it can potentially it is driving revenue because of that factor. And then the photos, they're not great, but they get the job done. And it also is in like a fairly decent location as well in comparison to the rest. Actually, it's fairly close to everybody else, but it's close to downtown, but not too close to downtown. Things like that, right? It's got a bit of a backyard. It's true logs, like all these things. Like, okay, well, maybe it's real. And the reality is that if this is real, it is extremely comparable to us. It's a 6-bedroom. It sleeps 6 people. It's a 3-bedroom with 1 bath. We're a 2-bedroom with 1.5 bath. We'll sleep 6 people. We're a log cabin as well. We're a little bit further away from the downtown area. We don't have as much true wood on the inside. However, we can build a significantly better listing. Again, we can do so much more on the inside, so much more on the outside. As you can see, if I get to their backyard, they didn't do anything to it. I think it's actually up at the top. Yeah, so they did nothing to it up here and back there. So we have so many ways we can beat this home if it is 100% accurate. And so let me see exactly how I ended up writing this one up. So this was strongly believe that we could do as well, if not better than this home, even though it's slightly larger and more log cabin-ish in the inside, meaning it's got more like true logs. Our listing would be superior in every way, which would allow us to compete. Only concern is location. We would be more secluded. So they're a little bit closer to the downtown, like I pointed out, whereas our listing, if you don't remember, is going to be a little bit further back from there. So my thought is like we're super comparable with this property, but I don't feel super confident about that property. And then the location is a bit of a factor as well. Okay. However, from here, we write that up and we keep going, right? Because so now what's just happened is we've gotten 2. We went from definitely not beating, not comparable to maybe, right? We hit this maybe property where it's like, I think we might be able to do that well. And then we get a super comparable property and we're going, I think we can do as well, right? I'm feeling more confident with the way that I'm even speaking about it just now, where I'm like, yeah, I think we could do as well as this, right? So whereas this one is so different than ours, it's hard to compare it apples to apples and be like, yeah, we're definitely gonna do as well. But when I see this one, it's very comparable to ours, and I go, I think we could do as well as that, right? Like it's like we could beat that. Now that's where I'm at so far. Okay, so I'm at this I'm starting to gain confidence where I'm saying I think we could go and do around that range. Okay, but we got to keep going, and this is the beauty of data where you keep going and you get this pattern. Okay, as you keep going. So the next one we're going to hit is this one here, and when I see this, it's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath that sleeps 8 people. And my instant thought when I look at these photos is, what a joke, right? Like we can beat this home without a doubt. It's a modern home. There's no character to it. It's honestly not that great of a listing. The photos suck, first off. The dining room's kind of in the kitchen. The kitchen is a good newer quality kitchen. The couch itself is not very large, doesn't look very comfortable. But all in all, the property is not that great of a property in the first place. It does have this extra room right here, but we also have an extra room. And so we would be able to compete with that. Plus, we would put a pool table in there. We'd have way more character. Pretty well everything about this home, I know that we could just absolutely crush. The photos, the design, our character, everything about it, we would be better than them. And if you actually look at the location of their property, give me 1 second. They are located right up here. So they're actually the furthest out property out of all of the properties. We would be right over here. They're over here. Everybody else is right down here. So this is honestly my favorite piece of data that we've come across so far, because this property is far away from the downtown, like ours is, which is huge, such a big deal, because that tells me that people are still booking this home and it's further out. Then on top of that, it's the same sized home. It's 2 bedrooms. It has an extra full bath, but regardless, it's roughly the exact same size, and it sleeps 8 people. And we could definitely make that happen. But the listing itself is so boring, right? There's nothing to it, and maybe people are booking this because it feels like a regular home, and they think it's going to be a little bit more reliable and or whatever it may be. But the reality is that I know that I can design my listing to be just as reliable and consistent and nice as this home, right? So when I see this, I go, we're going to beat it. That's the confidence level that you want. When you look at something and be, we will do better than this home without a doubt, because of all of the features that I've been saying over and over and over again. And so when the way that I wrote this one up is everything tells me that we could beat this home because we're in the same general area. We're a log cabin, which always helps. We would put together a better listing with more amenities, and we're the same size. Therefore, I strongly believe that we can outperform this listing. Now, here's the beautiful thing, guys. We've just gone and said that we don't think we can beat these ones. We're uncertain if we're going to be 100% with these ones, but we're fully confident that we're going to do better than 65. And so we're getting closer to this range as to knowing exactly where this property is going to end up and how much we believe it's going to make, okay? But we still have one more that's doing 55,000. And so we need to review that one as well. And so when we see this one, instantly, it's another super comparable property. It's a log cabin. It's a 2-bedroom, 1 bath. It only sleeps 4 people, but it's very, very comparable. And so when I look at it, now I have to decide, do I feel confident that I can beat this home? Now, first off, it's the middle of the summer. It's August, and they have a photo of the winter. That's a bad sign right off the bat, right? Then they have a photo of this, which is good. And then when I see this, what I'm seeing is a few things. So first off, looks awful, right? Makes this room feel probably even smaller than it actually is. I can see that they used good furniture and wallpaper and kind of gave this a nice design. But it's a small living room in general. And on top of that, it's a bad photo, making it feel even smaller. And so when I see that, I go, well, of course we're going to beat that. Yes, we will have this similar sort of ceiling, like we'll have a wood ceiling as well, but we'll actually have a wood wall on top of that. And so we're going to feel way more like a cabin than this one does. Living room set up than them, and better photos. Then I look at the dining room and I go, I know we don't really have a solid dining room whatsoever. Just for a refresher, for anyone who doesn't remember what the dining room looks like, that's our dining room, which is, not going to be super comparable to this. It's probably going to be fairly similar. So I go, okay, those two are on the same level, right? And then I can look at the kitchen, and I look at the kitchen and see that it's very dated. Again, bad photos across the board, so I know that's hurting the revenue already. But the kitchen is not comparable to ours at all. Our kitchen is without a doubt better than that kitchen. It's bigger for one. It's higher quality. It's got more character to it. And all around, it's just a better kitchen. That's their stovetop, by the way, in case anyone was wondering. And then if we keep going, we can see this is the bedroom. Again, decent design, but bad photos. And that goes for both of them. And then we are outside again. And we're outside and we don't see anything else. And so what's happening here, okay, and again, a lot of winter photos. What I'm realizing here is our home is bigger, first off, without a doubt, because we have the upstairs as well. Our kitchen's better. Our living room's better. And then they have bad photos. The design is good, but we're going to crush them on everything else. And they also, if you actually look at all the photos, there's 14 of them, and I believe it's only 10 that are actually listings that show off the interior of the home, okay? And so what I'm trying to say is that we will destroy this listing in so many ways, and it's so comparable to us. And so I feel so confident that we're going to beat this home without a doubt. And I know without a doubt we will do better than this listing. I was just finding it funny how I wrote this out a couple days ago, and I speak the exact same way. Anyways, so as you can see, we've now gone to this point, right? Where, again, let's run through it. We know we're probably not going to do this well. We feel like we're going to maybe end up around here, but we know for a fact we're going to do better than these two. And so now we've figured out our kind of general range of where we're going to fall. And so then what I would end up doing, and anyone, you can pause the video and read this entire analysis right here. But essentially what I did was I explained all of that through each comp, and I explained which ones were better. Okay, so I always call those top comps. I explained why they're better. These ones are better, and this is why. And then I explained the ones in the middle to saying as to why I thought we were comparable-ish to those properties. And then I explained why the ones at the bottom, we were going to beat them and why. Now, this scenario is slightly different though. And the reason being is because this one here, which is where I thought maybe we could end up, is, again, it's like comparing apples to oranges. It's very difficult to do. And then this one, which is around that 80,000, is a really bad listing. I don't fully trust it. Like, I get why it could be making this amount, but I don't feel it. I don't fully trust it 100% through my entire bones, right? And so what ended up happening was I knew for a fact we weren't going to beat these, but I knew for a fact we were going to beat these. And so technically, I'm now within a range of, I know for a fact we're going to do better than 65, but I know for a fact we're not really going to be 86. And so logically, we're only at $20,000 off. But I know I'm going to do better than this one. No, I'm not going to do better than that one. And that's how I came up with the 75,000. Typically, I would be relying on a couple of properties I was very close to, but because I couldn't fully trust this one, I couldn't say, hey, we're going to make 80,000. And so instead what I did was I took the range in between these two, knowing that we'll do better than this. I didn't know how much better, but I knew for a fact that we weren't going to be, without a doubt, beating this one. And so that's where I come up with the 100% confidence that we are going to be able to make $75,000 a year from this property. Okay. And that's reality. That's all you're doing. All you're doing is saying these ones, they're better. These ones, they're worse. We're right in the middle. And when you have a good amount of data, it's so easy because there's so many homes that are all within that range. And then you can just very easily figure out where you're going to fall. And so you feel so much confidence when you're determining what that 100% number is going to be. Now, the best case scenario and the worst case scenario tend to just be a variance from the 100% number. Like, you might do a little bit better or you might do a little bit worse. Now, typically, sometimes you can have, it's a wider range where you're like, there's a chance for you to do $30,000 better if you do X, Y, and Z. Or there's a chance for you to do $30,000 worse if you don't do X, Y, and Z, right? Now, for this one, it was very easy to be able to figure out these last two because the best case, I know we're not going to be doing better than 85 just because that's if we just did everything so well that people wanted to book our home more than they wanted to book a home on the water, right? And so it's like, is that going to happen? We don't know for a fact, but that's our best case scenario. Okay. And then the worst case scenario is if we did as well as this home here. It's like, well, this is going to be our worst case scenario. And it's like, we know we're going to beat this home, but if we don't do something, say we could do something wrong or something goes wrong with the listing or something happens, then that's likely going to be our worst case scenario where we're going to end up. And so this entire process is the process that you have to go through over and over and over again to determine the 100% confidence number for a property that you're considering to evaluate. And I don't know if that I made it seem easy or complicated or straightforward, or if it logically is making sense to you as I'm explaining this. I don't know for a fact how you're feeling with this right now, but I'm trying to tell you that it's not too complicated. You are just simply trying to figure out which ones are better, which ones are worse, where do you fall within the middle, okay? And obviously there's a lot of nuances and every single area is a little bit different, and there's so many different scenarios and factors and everything that comes along with it. But that's why I'm providing multiple videos and trainings for you to be able to see different scenarios to try and understand the different ways that you should be thinking about doing these evaluations, okay? And the last thing I'm going to add in here is you can see I put in what my key features and main concerns are, and then you can see that I added in what the design/amenities would be for this as well. And I think that I have got my point across as to the process that I go through for evaluating this, how I'm looking at the properties, what I'm thinking, and how I reason to myself logically what the property would end up making at the end of the day. And it's really, you've just got to use that logic. You've got to not lie to yourself. Let me put it that way. Let me end with that. Don't lie to yourself. Don't tell yourself that you can do as well as these ones just because you have so much pride in your ability to put together a listing that you know for a fact you're going to do better, even though you're not on the water. But the reality is that the water is the biggest revenue driver. And so it doesn't matter how beautiful your listing is, they are on the water, right? And so don't lie to yourself with the data. Let the data tell you exactly where you're going to fall and be humbled by it. Be okay by it. and use this as a main way to avoid a bad deal. And as soon as you find the good deal, that's when you move forward with it. And so it's really that simple. And I hope that this makes sense. And if you guys have any questions on this one, which I'm sure you will, please let me know. Just one last thing. I do offer this as a service for anybody who wants my company to do this for you instead. Okay. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please let me know.